We are back. It's the Joe Holka Show presented by FanDuel. It's our trending wide receivers for NFL Week 15. Before the chaos, after the chaos, everything in between, diving deep into the news, the narratives, how we can use all this chatter around the industry to find an edge at the most important position in fantasy football in DFS. Let's jump right into it. Obviously, we're going to start with the impact of some of these COVID situations around the league. We just saw what happened with Tyler Lockett shortly before we went live. But I do want to start with OBJ because that was like the first domino to go down earlier this week. Obviously, we could see someone like Van Jefferson see a little bit of an increased role. And then earlier today, Jalen Waddle also on the reserved COVID list, which falls probably DeVante Parker and one of the most underpriced wide receiver options on the entire slate against the Jets. So Matt, I'll let you take this any direction you would like since it's kind of a cluster right now, but it seems to be what everyone's talking about.
Yeah, I think that let's start with the Rams situation because I think Van Jefferson is an interesting. I actually kind of think him and Parker are interesting guys regardless of the COVID thing. And of course, it certainly boosts your outlook if the two players ahead of you on the depth chart are going to be out of the game. With Beckham, man, he was playing so well, dude. We talked about this on the show. The article is still, again, up on the website, receptionperception.com, if folks want to go check it out. He was playing extremely well as an individual, isolated from his surroundings, isolated from Baker Mayfield when he was in Cleveland. And I think he still looks great. Now he obviously just looks incredible in this system with this quarterback. But man, he looks awesome. He's getting separation. I think the biggest thing, and who knows, some of this stuff is noisy anyways, like contested catch stuff, but I think he looks almost like the old Odell Beckham at the catch point, like going up and high pointing these balls and stuff like that. After the catch too, great speed in space. That's good to see as well, because that was kind of the one big question I had from him after looking at some of his games earlier in the season. He's been looking incredible. Him and Van Jefferson actually are the only two wide receivers since week 12 to score 3 touchdowns. Van Jefferson, I think, is an extremely good player. And now you're looking at them since the Robert Woods injury, changing Van Jefferson's role a little bit. One of the reasons I was in on him in the preseason, why he's on a ton of my redraft rosters, is that I thought he could play that X receiver position that this offense was so lacking. Obviously, then Robert Woods goes down. They've moved him into, not a pure slot role. Cooper Kupp is obviously their primary slot receiver. He's taken more since week 12, more than 50% of his snaps from the inside. Beckham is like the pure outside wide receiver of this group. So Jefferson is a guy I think is a good play regardless, but now obviously without Beckham, potentially, we don't know, that would just push more volume his way. I just think Jefferson is a very good player. I like this game environment for fantasy. Obviously, no Tyler Lockett on the other side maybe depresses things a bit for Seattle's offense, especially considering he's the one guy who's played extremely well, even as Russ has been slumping, and then even as Russ has started to come back up. We're still waiting for DK Metcalf. The volume is there, but not the efficiency yet. Like this game environment for fantasy almost either way, but Van Jefferson, I think, is an extremely attractive play this week for sure.
Yeah, I'm curious. So it's still a chance that OBJ does play. What does a player have to make it through in order to get through this protocol? I guess since he was earlier in the week, that may help him, but everything I've been seeing, it's still a long shot at this point that OBJ plays, right?
That would be my guess, is it's a long shot, but I think he can still get 2 negative tests and potentially be out there. But again, who knows, man? Who really knows with this stuff? But assuming that he's out there, I still think Jefferson's a solid play, but obviously much more attractive if there is no Beckham there.
Yeah, let's talk about DeVante Parker for a second. We talked about him, I think, a couple weeks ago. Obviously, Waddle now looks like he's on the COVID reserve list as well. If he doesn't play, Parker kind of going back into that alpha role. The targets have he's been relatively consistent already this year in the games that he has played. So it comes down to that, but also it's the Jets, right? Originally, I was kind of thinking that maybe Tua would be a little bit sneaky. I no longer think that, and I definitely don't think that now that Parker is so underpriced for this type of role. Target share aside, like, do you still think that Parker can go out there and be like that Parker that we remember even from like times of last year when he was priced around like 6,500, 7K, man? It's a long way from that at this point.
Long way, yeah. I had a bold prediction before the Waddle news that DeVante Parker was going to be a top 20 receiver this week, and then obviously feel pretty good about that. Now, at this point, last time we saw the Miami Dolphins, which was prior to their bye week, he was still third in terms of routes run on this team, behind Jalen Waddle and behind Mike Gesicki, who is a fake tight end. Of course, he's more of a wide receiver than anything else. Parker, 5 targets in that game, but you look at the average depth of target, he's clearly the highest on the team. So, like, Parker doesn't need a ton of volume like a Jalen Waddle to get there. The other thing, though, that kind of The only thing that gives me a pause with all of this is they've so clearly changed their offense, even from what they were doing last year when DeVante Parker, was at that salary, as you mentioned. They are the most RPO heavy team in the NFL by a long shot. They're the most play action team in the NFL by a long shot. And Parker is just a very different player than Jalen Waddle. This stuff is like perfect for Jalen Waddle. Those in breakers, intermediate digs, crossing routes, slant routes, perfect for a player like Jalen Waddle, especially the more we've seen of Waddle, the better he's looked, because I think he's just gotten healthier throughout the course of the season. It's such a good player as Jalen Waddle. Parker's not in that tier for me, but at the same time, the matchup against the Jets, the potential volume boost without Waddle just makes you feel really good about his chances. And because that average depth of target is higher, just a couple of big plays I think are basically going to pay back that salary. He is definitely going to go down as one of the most mispriced guys on this entire slate.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Before we move on, I want to remind you guys, I alluded to it before, but we do have that second YouTube channel now for the Joe Holka Show, so make sure you guys subscribe over there when you get a chance, preferably after you subscribe to Harmon's YouTube channel, though. So you'll be seeing a bunch of exclusive picks and videos over there that I'm not going to be posting anywhere else, so I don't want you guys to miss out on that. A key decision point I think this week is going to revolve around what to do with the Bills wide receiver group. Like Emmanuel Sanders looking very doubtful to suit up. A lot is contingent on how Josh Allen's foot sprain can kind of hinder his mobility in this week also. But I think one guy that definitely stands out regardless of this is just Gabriel Davis. We've talked about him, I feel like, a decent amount this year, but I was at the game last week and they just look to be scheming him the ball a little bit more. I'm super interested in the price tag, obviously, but curious what you think of him recently as well.
Yeah, coming off a season high, 83% of the snaps was Gabe Davis. Obviously, the Emmanuel Sanders injury has something to do with that, but I agree with you. I feel like they have, his routes run haven't really been boosting the last few weeks or anything like that. Obviously, prior to last week with that season high snap rate, but it feels like when he's on the field, they're trying to get him the ball, and that makes sense to me because Joe, I kind of feel like this Bills offense is. Would you say they're like looking for an answer? Like they're looking for a counterpunch at this point? Like they're not just rolling out the same old 2020 Bills offense that, and just from an efficiency perspective, like bang, they're out there, same type of unit. And I kind of think that I've said, and I feel like this sounds disrespectful to Gabe Davis. I don't mean it that way, but it's like if they had like a guy like Gabe Davis, but was actually like a starting level consistent player, that's like exactly what this offense needs.
What they need.
Maybe Gabe Davis takes that step, because I actually kind of think that the Bills, I wrote this in his reception perception profile, which I just tweeted out a couple of days ago. I kind of think Gabe Davis, they were smart to hedge their bets on him going into the season, signing a veteran like Emmanuel Sanders. That, okay, if Gabe Davis, who he showed big playability last year. If you look at his reception perception chart, 69.6% success rate on the 9 route, extremely good on other deep patterns, the curl route, the dig route. There's something there with Gabe Davis, and he can make plays in tight coverage. Like I said, the guy can absolutely burn, but his overall success rates were pretty low among the rookies that were charted from the 2020 class. I don't think he was ready to be every down wide receiver, and it looked like the Bills agree. But like now at this point, they've been trying to, like, Emmanuel Sanders was their guy that was the vertical threat all year long, and it's like, what are we doing with that? Obviously, they need a deep threat. They don't even necessarily right now. It's like right now, forget about consistent every down wide receiver. They need somebody else who can burn besides Stephon Diggs on this offense. And I think it's time to fire Gabe Davis up. I think it's time for them to start getting him some more looks, because as I said, this passing offense needs a counterpunch. And I think Gabe Davis as a big perimeter receiver, a guy who can do that vertical stuff, can win in tight spaces. I think it's about time the Bills go towards Gabe Davis away from Emmanuel Sanders anyways. And this injury, I think, just forces their hand, which is probably, again, unfortunately for Sanders, a player I really like, but, probably better for the team right now.
Yeah, I would agree. They definitely need someone to step up. Obviously, we've seen Dawson Knox catch like a ton of touchdowns, but outside of that, hasn't been like a huge factor. And now his price is at a point where it's a little bit harder to get to. I think that like even people haven't really been talking enough about probably is just Cole Beasley battling through injuries for a while as well. Like now that we're going to have potentially less mobility for Josh Allen, I could see Cole Beasley getting a little bit of a bump. We haven't really seen that ceiling performance from him in quite some time, but in theory, if he's not going to be able to run as much from his quarterback, I should say, you might get see a few more of those dump offs go Beasley's way, or if they're in the red zone, some of those plays that would normally kind of be a threat to have Josh Allen score on the ground. Maybe we just see a few more targets in the red zone for Gabe Davis. So I'm like really interested in both of those guys as of now. I'm curious your thoughts on Stefon Diggs though. Even like his routes run and his like target share, all that stuff has been a little bit more inconsistent this year. Is that just, I guess, a result of this offense being a little bit more inconsistent? Is there anything from Diggs that has you worried? Like he's basically priced up towards some of these elite options. And even on this slate, it's pretty hard to click Stefon Diggs at this point versus Cooper Kupp and Devontae Adams, and that was a pretty easy thing to do for a little while.
Yeah, I think that the way this offense looks right now, like you said, they're not the same unit from a consistency angle. Some of those plays where Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs were just making money on vertical patterns, those are not really present this year. I think they have been a little off on hitting some of those big plays. That's the thing too, the way this offense is constructed in Buffalo, like they need to be the 2020 Bills. Like they can't even be like the 2021 Bills haven't been that awful. I feel like we're talking like the sky is falling on this unit, and for the most part, like it's not as if they've been a disaster of a passing offense, but they needed to be like firing on all cylinders because we know they can't run the ball, and that's just such a huge problem at this point. I think to like Josh Allen last week accounts for 90% of the team's offense. Like he is the entire operation there, and if like he's off just a little bit on some of these passes, I think it's fair to say he's not been as efficient, as sharp as he was in 2020. That's a lot to expect of a player, by the way, is to be as hot as he was in 2020. I feel like that just hampers the overall unit because they're so reliant on him. And like I mentioned with the Stefon Diggs thing, you look at this offense in week one and we think, man, they've got Diggs, they've got Sanders, they've got Gabe Davis when they want to throw him out there, and then they've got Cole Beasley. And then Dawson Knox emerges. It's like, wow, that's 5 options they could potentially go to. Now we're looking at it as, well, Dawson Knox is a good player, but he's not a volume tight end. Cole Beasley might be hurt. Sanders is hurt and hasn't been effective in months. And now they're just starting to get Dave Davis involved. That's a lot different than what we expected. And like it's one thing like to try to funnel the offense through one receiver. It's a whole nother thing in practice, like where all of these guys just aren't as effective as they were last year. So long story short, no, there's nothing with Diggs that has me concerned. I just think the overall construction of the offense has led to them not being quite as efficient moving the ball consistently as they were last year.
Yeah, and you see the yards per attempt way down for Josh Allen as well, which is hurting certain parts of the offense. But I'm with you, man. They just need that second guy to like really step up to take things a little bit off of Diggs' shoulders. Anything else that you think has popped up throughout the week that we should be like keeping an eye on? Man, it seems like every time I open Twitter, it's like a major player that is out that we're just kind of trying to absorb the Tyler Lockett stuff. But man, anything else that you want to chat about?
I do think obviously DK Metcalf's going to be extremely popular this week now. I think he probably was a pretty good play anyways going into this week. And with Metcalf, it's funny too. The efficiency numbers are just so low compared to Tyler Lockett of late. I don't really know that there's any football explanation for that. When you watch Metcalf play, like it's just these thin margin for error plays not going his way, or touchdowns getting called back. I still think Metcalf's a very good player, and I could easily see him crushing this week against the Rams after a lot of folks are probably burned from playing him last week against the Houston Texans and everything going Tyler Lockett's way. So that will be fascinating to see how that goes, because I still think Russ is not quite the Russ we expected, but has been getting better since coming back from that finger injury. But to lose his DK Metcalf is like the alpha receiver of this unit, but we know that Tyler Lockett is so important to this passing game, and the connection there with Russ is so important. It's kind of like we're back into the wilderness with the Seahawks offense again, unfortunately, because they don't have, it's not as if they have a ton of depth behind these two guys.